This is Holy Trinity Anglican Church, Vancouver. The book of Acts is about the establishing of churches. Christianity is just getting going, and the Apostle Paul has a major role in promoting and facilitating its spread. We hear a lot about diversity nowadays, and it's true that the church, by its nature, is diverse and inclusive. Take a look at Acts 20, verse 4, as evidence of that. He, Paul, was accompanied by Sopater, son of Pyrrhus, from Berea, Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, Gaius from Derbe, Timothy also, and Tychicus and Trophimus from the province of Asia. These are representatives from the churches Paul has founded or visited, and they are a diverse group of people, geographically and ethnically, Jews and Gentiles. But nonetheless, there are boundaries to the church, and Acts gives us pointers regarding the church's distinctives. Verse 7. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. There is much activity in Acts, as the book's name leads one to expect. Paul keeps himself busy doing things, but he knows how to prioritize. On the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. Where do your priorities lie in this regard? I am in my 58th year, and I've been going to church all my life. But a significant change during this period has not only been what proportion of the population goes to church, but also how regularly those who consider themselves church people actually attend. I think the two things may be linked. Could this be how the reasoning goes? I'm pretty good in that I go to church at all. Most people don't go to church, so God or the church or whoever should be glad that I'm here once a month. We read in Hebrews 10:25, "Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching," the day referring to our anticipation of Jesus' return. A healthy church is marked by members who see gathering on the Lord's Day as a priority over other activities. In the words of the prayer of consecration used when we have Holy Communion at this service, to do so is our duty and our joy. Incidentally, there is significance in the fact that we gather on the first day of the week. This was the day on which Jesus rose from the dead, the resurrection, and it means that the Christian Sabbath is Sunday, the first day of the week, as opposed to Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath. Now, the day of rest comes as a gift before the week that follows, rather than as a seeming reward at the end of a week of work. And any calendar or diary that starts the week properly on a Sunday gets my approval. The church at Troas was meeting at night, presumably because Sunday was then a working day. We're told, verse 7, but Paul kept on talking until midnight. Ministers know all about pushback, particularly nowadays. Fairly high up the list, for some people at least, is how long the service is. And I don't mean people complaining because the service is too short. In England, it has been said that Anglican churches have a clock on the outside, typically on the bell tower, whereas nonconformist churches have theirs on the inside, in the sanctuary. I'd like to think that this is Anglican recognition of the timelessness of what goes on in church. The Russell Crowe film, Gladiator, is 9 minutes shy of being 3 hours long. But I didn't realise how long I'd been in the cinema in Sydney, Australia, and it was only when I left that I discovered that it was after midnight and I'd missed the last train home. I had to catch the night bus instead. If church is important, if gathering at church together is truly our duty and our joy, should you be clock watching during it? I feel I must say something about that curious verse 8. There were many lamps in the upstairs room where they were meeting. Why does Luke tell us this? I can't claim to know for certain, but here's my stab at an answer. There were rumours about what went on at Christian gatherings, but this detail indicates that nothing shady was transpiring. As John writes, if we walk in the light, as he, God, is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. But perhaps more prosaically, Luke wants to give an excuse for Eutychus falling asleep. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in what Paul had to say, but just that it was too hot on account of all the lamps. Verse 9. Eutychus fell to the ground from the 3rd story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, and put his arms around him. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "He's alive." This is reminiscent of Elijah's resuscitation of the widow of Zarephath's son. In 1 Kings 17:24 we read, "Then the woman said to Elijah, 'Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth.'" Likewise, Paul's intervention acted as an authentication of his apostleship, lest any doubted this. What happened next? What might be liable to happen here were there to be such an occurrence? I can well anticipate quite a commotion, with a lot of attention given to the healer. But we read in verse 11, "Then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left." Said quite matter-of-factly, but again an indication of where the church's priorities lay. They celebrated Holy Communion, and Paul continued preaching until daylight. The best film about the sinking of the Titanic is, as far as I'm concerned, A Night to Remember, made in 1958. It ends the morning after, with the survivors assembled on RMS Carpathia. A clergyman led those gathered in saying the general thanksgiving from the Book of Common Prayer. "We, thine unworthy servants, do give thee most humble and hearty thanks for all thy goodness and loving kindness to us and to all men, particularly to those who desire now to offer up their praises and thanksgivings for thy late services vouchsafed unto them." I take this as a testament to the spirit that prevailed in 1912 and even in 1958. It speaks of people's priorities, even in the midst of disaster. What of us now? Where do our priorities lie? And what does 10 months of church closure have to say about this? Verse 12. The people took the young man home alive and were greatly comforted. Comfort is a brand of fabric softener in the UK. Its slogan, when launched in 1969, was "Softness is a thing called comfort." What is it that you think of when you hear of comfort? Being offered or offering a box of Kleenex and a cup of tea, perhaps. I'm going to suggest that the Bible's version of comfort is somewhat more robust and helpful. The Greek word translated as comforted in verse 12 is basically the same as that translated as encouraging and encouragement in verses 1 and 2 of our passage. It's also used elsewhere to refer to the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete. The uproar referred to in verse 1 was a riot in Ephesus directed against Paul and his companions. Paul had been faced, verse 3, with a plot against him. Eutychus had been picked up dead. These are all too real and significant issues to deal with. How far does a box of tissues and a cup of tea go in such scenarios? Not far enough, I'd suggest. God offers real intervention and solutions in the situations people are faced with, even today. The Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, is not effete, but robust and powerful. The Latin root of our word comfort means with strength, con fortis. Encourage means to inspire or incite courage. God, through the Holy Spirit, provides strength and boldness to enable Paul and his companions and us to carry on faithfully, even in the face of adversity. And that's what should be happening as we gather together as a church, Sunday by Sunday. That's why it's important that we gather together as a church, Sunday by Sunday. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Amen.